We're recording this at 5 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. Quite a lot to take in there, and we could well be overtaken by events. What is certain is that Stokes' captaincy of the Test team is on the line, and neither he nor Atkinson is likely to be involved at the Oval next week. For now, I'm joined by Matt Roller and Vish Ehantharajah to reflect on another quiet week in English cricket, both of whom I'm sure will be having an eye on the WhatsApps in case this story moves while the pod is ongoing. We've had a blog running. It's sort of been on all channels, although the updates have been sporadic. Vish, you've been feeding into our live coverage. What is the latest as you understand it?
Just to start, what a ludicrous intro that was to this podcast. Like, absolutely, fitting of the situation at hand. I suppose, the latest, as we know it, is that Ben Stokes is considering his future, both as England captain and as an international cricketer. I think it's something that caught the ECB on the hop a little bit this morning. I think to take us back to Monday when this came out, the talk was that the ECB are giving Stokes the opportunity to resign on his own terms, with, it also open to the fact that they could also remove him from his post pending their own investigations. I'm not entirely sure if it was done as a threat or done, I suppose, because he'd reached that stage where he felt like walking away altogether. But there was a strong whiff of that this morning that Stokes would retire from international cricket. It felt like the nuclear option. And I think the fact that we haven't heard anything probably means he's being talked off the ledge a little bit. Bear in mind that there is still a long way to go between now and the next test. Obviously, it's not a test that Stokes is going to be part of, but they do need to pick a squad for it. That's unlikely to be, by the end of the week. It will have to be in the next couple of days. It sounds like Stokes is meeting with his own team tomorrow. You'd imagine a couple of nights' sleep, as it would be from Sunday, if we take the fact that he didn't have any sleep on Sunday, given the hours of of the incident. But another night's sleep would perhaps give it a bit more perspective and probably not do something so drastic. But in terms of his future as Test captain, it does feel that this could be it, really. As a Test cricketer, I suppose we'll wait and find out.
Matt, I guess we're expecting on this podcast to be talking about how England had, got the summer off to a good start with a win over New Zealand. There was a few talking points from the game. We all love a pitch story. And then at about 6 p.m. Yesterday, so Monday evening, the ECB put out a statement that Stokes and Atkinson were being investigated for breaking curfew. And that is a key issue at this point because of what went on in the winter and the fact that the curfew was brought back in after, the various misdemeanors in New Zealand, in particular, and Australia for the Ashes. The captain being at the centre of it, whatever, we're going to find out more, I'm sure, about the details of the incident, but it is not a good starting place.
Yeah, it's a shocker. It's so frustrating as much as anything else. I think after England, it to some extent, it was quite an unsatisfactory win, but the most important thing by miles, as far as they were concerned, was the fact it was a win after the series that they had in Australia over the winter, after the missed opportunities against India last summer as well. And Stokes actually pretty much immediately after the game was striking all the right notes about it. He said, "I won't be really happy until I go and celebrate with the boys over a beer," and I don't think anyone would begrudge him having a celebratory beer after getting off to a winning start this summer. Immediately after that, he was saying that he was buoyed to hear Ollie Robinson saying this is just the start, and Stokes said, "We've won the first game in the summer. It's great we've managed to do it. We've got 5 more to go, 2 more against New Zealand, who are a quality team. We always have great battles against them. We're 1 test match down out of 6, so there's a long way to go still." And then 12 hours later was still out from the night before and in a fracas with some rugby players in a nightclub in Chelsea. It's makes you want to tear your hair out, really, particularly after, as you say, the reintroduction of a curfew, which he would have been party to. And all of the noise that we've had over the past 5 months about England learning from their mistakes in Australia, reconnecting with the fans who think that they're wearing their positions and their privileges as international cricketers lightly. So for him to, at the first pretty much the first possible opportunity, actually, if you think that this is his first international game since January, to be involved in exactly the sort of incident that a curfew is designed to avoid players getting embroiled in. It's a total shocker.
I mean, there have been plenty of mantras and buzzwords associated with this team under Brendan McCullum, Vish. I mean, it seems his tenure is going to be best remembered for the comment that nothing good happens after midnight, but it's a message his players have continually failed to heed.
I mean, loads of good things happen after midnight, but not very good things happen after midnight if you act like idiots, really. And I think maybe that's where we've got to make the distinction, because they did break curfew. A member of, I suppose, the ECB's security detail was injured in this fracas, and as captain, that is a lot of responsibility that Stokes has to wear. That it essentially happened under his watch, as someone under the ECB's employ was hurt. At the same time, the details come through bit by bit, but in the picture that we've been able to confidently put together, it doesn't sound like Stokes did all that much wrong, really. Whether that matters, I don't know. It probably curries favour with the public, those kind of details, which is probably why they're important. But I think ultimately, yeah, like Matt said it. I was talking to another journalist earlier today, and Key and McCullum have spoken so much over the last 2 months that you can you can strip quotes from previous press conferences and put them into the news stories we're writing about this particular incident and the fallout from it. As you said, that nothing good happens after midnight. He wants players to be making the back pages, not the front pages. Rob Key talks about that there is no drinking culture in the environment, that's way off the mark. I mean, it's just stupid is the word I keep coming back to, because it's, as Matt alluded to there, it's just you can't fall at the first hurdle, with this kind of stuff, especially when how much Stokes will know himself, how bad the last 6 months have been, how bad the time since the Ashes has been, because he's lived it. He hasn't played any cricket. He wasn't, doesn't play any white ball cricket, doesn't play any franchise cricket, was basically sat at home, doing very little, seeing all the fallout and knowing that there was something to address there, or at least to be shown to address. And now with this coming out, it's just, what was one quiet night? I mean, there's 6 tests this summer. You're back in London next week. There's win the series and then you can go out, and I suppose the problem is they got caught, really, isn't it? Because of the incident, we know about it. And it might just be a case of wrong place at the wrong time. It might just be, bad luck. And then you could have asked yourself, why does bad luck keep happening to this team?
Yeah. Oh, well, and in the sense, Matt, that after everything that happened in the winter and all the calls that were made by the ECB, Richard Gould, Richard Thompson, we're basically sticking with everyone because we're going to learn those lessons. And this is clearly Stokes is the one in the eye of the storm here, and if whatever he does over the next 24, 48 hours, it seems like the Cricket Discipline Commission, and there's going to be an official sanction here. But does this come back to McCullum and then ultimately Key as the ultimate authorities, the hierarchy that have said we've learned lessons and we're going to do better, and then have messed up first time round?
Yeah, I guess it's tricky in all of these to attribute the blame precisely, and I'm sure Key and McCullum are both furious about the fact that someone who's very much part of the leadership group and is arguably as important as either of those two in setting the culture is screwed up at the first time of asking effectively this summer. But yeah, of course, it has to ask questions about how effective they've been. I mean, if we sort of zoom out and think big picture, if you think of the whole Key, McCullum, Stokes era, it feels like there was a very welcome loosening of the whole team right back in 2022, post-COVID, no restrictions. All these players who had played so much international cricket in COVID-safe, biosecure environments, and it had become an absolute drag. That loosening has been, it's difficult to put the toothpaste back in a tube, and I think that's been proven over the past year or so, where people have players have taken liberties, and Key and McCullum have, for all their the post-Ashes review stuff about trying to focus on culture and better individual and collective decision making. It all feels extremely hollow when something like this happens straight away at the start of the international summer. Key said in, I think, April or maybe March, when he was leading the post-Ashes review, that he very much suggested that it was a few bad apples when it came to a drinking problem, which he denied England had. He said he said like lots of teams, there's 2 or 3 players that can be irresponsible with alcohol given that opportunity. Well, if you look through the team from the first test, you had Duckett, Noosa video, you had Bethel, Brooke and Tongue, who were all on that night out in Wellington. Tongue admittedly slightly different because of the fact that he wasn't playing an ODI the next day, but Brooke and Bethel definitely. And now Stokes and Atkinson, so it's half the team. It feels increasingly like it's 2 or 3 players that can be responsible with alcohol, not the other way around. So yeah, it of course you have to ask questions about the entire environment and system when something like this happens, because it's the most frustrating aspect of it is the complete failure to learn lessons, which it feels like it's a recurring theme of this team and this environment.
Vish, what's your sense with kind of how Stokes has clearly stewed on the events of the winter for the last few months. He hasn't really done much media. There was that kind of in-house interview. There'd been the odd post on social media. He seemed a little bit subdued, I thought, in his when he did do press at Lord's. I guess one of the fears always with 4 or 5 years ago when Stokes was given the captaincy was that the pressure and the demands of the role would crush one of England's best players, and potentially that's where we are now.
Yeah, it was the great fear that you couldn't give it to an all-rounder because of exactly that. I'd say it's probably more down to general form rather than external pressure that Stokes is, I suppose, on the field in a bit of a rut. But you're right to say that he doesn't quite seem the same person that he did at the start of Australia, let's say. He was quite tetchy in his first press conference the day before the first test. He started the press conference with something along the lines of, it's not, time for talking's over. It's just about actions now. It doesn't matter what I say. And he's like, sure, mate, but it's the start of a press conference. You've got to give us something. This is how this thing works. And you know that. Stokes has used press conferences so often. I think I wrote off that press conference about how language was such an important part of what Stokes in particular was trying to achieve with this team. And not just positive talk, but, I suppose the things that were then thrown back in their face when they, I suppose, flunked the 23 Ashes, lost in India in 24. Were all things that they needed to say to themselves and needed to say to one another to get them out of that funk that you mentioned before Stokes took over. I think the thing that's probably eating away at him is the fact that this is very slowly turned from Ben Stokes' England team to Brendan McCullum's England team. A lot of that has been unavoidable because of the retirements and things like that. I think the lead up to this summer, McCullum has made sure to do more press. I don't think it's a coincidence that when we were, going to the ECB about this particular story and I suppose the situations that emanated from it, there was a feeling of, because Stokes has seemingly decided to sort out his own decision independently, really, that it's the ECB versus Stokes. Versus might be a bit strong, but they're certainly not working together on this particular thing. And, if he relinquishes the captaincy, then it's very much not his team anymore. We might have seen the last of him in a Test shirt. We don't know that, but I think the irritation that you sensed and that we all sensed around the game as well, even post match, I think it comes from the fact that the job isn't what it was to Stokes anymore. It might be because of what happened in Australia and how Australia panned out, but I think it might also be because he's at 35, turned 35 on the first day of the first test. Maybe he's just had enough of it. And I'm not saying it led to this situation on Sunday, but I don't know. It might be it might be the necessary out for him. Let's put it that way.
And if this does turn out to be his last, test as captain, last international appearance, full stop, that there's no small amount of irony that the next guy in line is the one where who with this all began with getting clocked by a bouncer in New Zealand back in October, Harry Brook.
Yeah, it's it would have felt quite unlikely, wouldn't it? If you think back to the aftermath of the Sydney Test when the ECB were putting out their statement for the first time in response to the Telegraph story on the initial details of that Brook altercation, because there was a gradual drip feed of new information coming all the time. It would have felt pretty unlikely that Harry Brook would captain England in a Test match this summer. And let's be honest, England have been very open about it and said that Brook was very lucky to survive as white ball captain, and only did so by the skin of his teeth. So yeah, you're right. It would be a pretty surprising decision if he suddenly becomes all format captain. That said, I think it was always possible that Brook would captain a Test this summer. We know what Stokes' fitness record has been like for the past few years. He has missed games. Ollie Pope has often stepped in. And I'm sure that the ECB, when they were thinking about whether or not to, or how severely to discipline Brook late last year, would have weighed up their options and ended up deciding that, if in the event that Stokes is unavailable at some point, we're still comfortable with this guy captaining in a Test match. So I think he's the obvious choice to take over. I understand why people might think about, could they go for a stopgap, an alternative option, give it to Joe Root for the summer while we sort things out or whatever. But I think Brook is the man they will go for. But you're right, it would be a pretty extraordinary thing. The idea that he might head into a captain's press conference and have to respond to or have to give his take on Ben Stokes' altercation in a nightclub is pretty extraordinary.
Well, I mean, the ECB
got
out ahead.
The difference is Stokes actually made it in, didn't he? So it's one up on Brook there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea of Brook saying that I do want a situation next week where Brook says this could be the making of Ben Stokes.
Well, the ECB got out ahead of this story, I suppose, in the way they very much didn't in the winter. Hopefully, Brook has given some better advice than he got when he sat down and addressed that in Sri Lanka and tried to cover up for everyone else that was there, and subsequently made that story worse. I mean, in terms of replacing Stokes as a captain, that's one problem, because the reason we're still it's still Ben Stokes' team, or Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes are in charge, is that there weren't loads of other options, and even sort of notwithstanding Stokes' waning form, I mean, Vish kind of having to replace him in the 11 will actually necessitate some juggling, probably. I mean, Gus Saxon maybe won't play either of these next two tests, but there are other quicks who can come off the bench there. But what do England do about rebalancing the side without the all-rounder who has been at the heart of everything for the last 4 years, but also for basically the last decade?
I mean, he sort of has helped them with that decision by dropping down to 7, hasn't he? Because I suppose you could swap it, put in Rehan Ahmed, and then pick the extra bowler. Matt's done like a run through of the particular options on the blog, but I mean, he is only bowling these days, isn't he? And the move to 7, it was sold as giving Jamie Smith more responsibility, which is entirely fair. It's certainly a position he's going to be more comfortable batting in, and he did pretty well in the second innings, Smith, with that 30 odd. But yeah, with Stokes, I suppose it's probably a simpler decision than it was, which only really adds to the sadness of this, because I'm not saying we all knew it was going to end in this way, but we knew that Ben Stokes' career was going to end in a spectacular way. We didn't know if that would be on or off the field. And I suppose there was always a thing of it would be so hard to replace him with all the great moments he's given us. And actually, in the form he's in, and certainly in, say, your career he's in, it isn't really. It might be as simple as, picking an all-rounder, Rehan Ahmed, an all-rounder who spins it, and then bringing, a seamer for Bashir and a seamer for Gus.